Okay.
But why don't we get started for the? We got some people in the audience. Uh, well,
Okay.
welcome everyone to this the 13th annual Keystone Progressive Summit. This is our second year doing virtually. Hopefully, next year we will do this in person. We had the Chloe Phipps and the Reverend Earl Harris, and then Mike Alexander, who probably will join us momentarily. So I will turn it over to you, gentlemen. Welcome.
Can hear you, Mr. Rodriguez.
He just
I
turned
see you praying.
right. He just turned the session over to us. So, um, hello all. My name is Claude Phipps. I'm going to serve as the host for this event, and these three speakers who are going to present are Reverend Earl Harris, okay, Mike Alexander, and in the end myself. Okay. Um, very quick background. One sentence. I'm a retired IT executive who've been involved with the community and community engagements. Okay. Um, I'm just seeing somebody's screens coming in. Okay, great. Um, I'm going to. The next person to introduce himself will be Mr. Harris.
Hi, my name is Pastor Earl Harris. I past practice as an attorney in the city of Harrisburg, and also attorney for the Harrisburg School District. Did real estate development and financing, and pastored a church for 24 years.
Uh, so I'm trying to look to see if our other speaker, he's still trying to get on. You know, a little bit more about me, if you mind. Again, being a retired IT executive, but I'm also a certified district judge. I sit on numerous boards in the city of Harrisburg here, and basically, um, what we want to present today is our approach to eliminating structural racism uh, in all government programs, but more in the communities that we basically exist in. Okay, so I know this is going to be a little bit out of order. So, Mr. Harris, I'm going to turn this over to you for your part of the presentation. Again, and when Mike comes
Excellent,
on, I'll basically have Mike present his.
excellent. What I'm going to share with you is the community organizing portion of it. Michael Alexander, when he gets on, and he will go through the intricacies of looking at the structural racism, and we're defining structural racism within the framework of those types of automatic thoughts, those actions which occur without people thinking, that which is embedded in all of us. If you've lived in America, lived in this world, it's embedded in you, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of color, gender, etc. And as a result, you oftentimes, it doesn't matter who's in office, whether it's black, brown, white, doesn't matter, because it's so, the racism is built into the system in terms of how we function, how we operate. All of us, black or white or brown, male or female, doesn't matter. It's automatic. And what we've decided to do is in order to deal with these thoughts, think in terms of, by the way, in terms of understanding this, think in terms of an algorithm. An algorithm will end up with certain results and you won't even see it. It'll determine whether or not the insurance in a particular neighborhood will be higher. And the reason it's higher is because oftentimes there's people of color in that particular neighborhood, or there's consensus, there's certain degrees of in terms of income people in a certain neighborhood, and those algorithms are structured so as to make to end up with a result that everyone says is fair, but in reality they're not. And it's embedded into everything that we don't see it, and we effectuate it, and we affect each of us. So what we're encouraging you to do You want to talk to me? Say something, Claude?
No,
Claude, do you
I
want to speak?
no, you're okay.
Okay, I'm fine. Then I'll
Okay.
continue. I apologize. What we're doing is organizing in the city of Harrisburg a task force on eliminating structural racism, and it's not just in governmental programs, but eliminating structural racism. Period. And we're looking at because it's embedded in everything that we do and everything in whatever decisions we make. And I want to go through the process and suggest this is something could be done anywhere at any time. And it's extremely important to look at the how. So I guess it's about 8 months now. What we did was to identify, recognizing that we wanted to affect public policy. In order to affect public policy, we had to be able to create a vehicle which would get the attention of and the respect of and be listened to by people who are in public office. And we also, the team said, okay, what do politicians want? There's two things that they want. They want votes and they want money. So what happens is that we could identify, we needed to get people who would be willing to work with us, who were in considered to be influential. Every area is different, but what we did was we took a look at the voting records for the city of Harrisburg, and we looked at the wards and the areas where the people voted and where people didn't vote, because the money generally follows the people who vote in terms of a particular city or municipality or whatever. We identified persons in areas where there was the highest rate of people voting, recognizing that we needed to have people of influence who would go with us and to work with people who don't have influence. So you marry the two up. And it's the same strategy we used when I was working with SNCC in '64, is that you integrate yourself into the neighborhood. You got to be a part of the neighborhood. People have to feel comfortable with you. And if so, I'm going to suggest that you work within the neighborhood in which you have familiarity and where people know you. We identified the persons who are in certain wards and precincts where their voting record was good, and that the municipality would look at to them for whatever suggestions they had if they came to them. We identify those persons. They were key persons. Within the city of Harrisburg, I'll dig down to the details. Ward 9 is an area in Harrisburg where there's 5,500 votes in terms of people of color, black and brown. And another ward. Ward 1 is considered a river ward near Susquehanna Township. What we did was to recognize that the persons in Ward 9, they voted at a 12 to 15, 16% rate. So even though they had an overwhelming number of voters, the number of people who in fact voted was significantly smaller than the areas which are on the river wards, which are predominantly Caucasian. So we identified the persons who, both in Ward 9 as well as in Ward, the river ward, where the votes were high, married those two together of common interest. How do we do that? Well, from my perspective, I look for people who have a history of working collaboratively with others. And so every community has those people. You connect with those people and make sure that they also live within the area that you want to target. And the reason that's important is because, again, the politicians are looking at where the people live and the influence they have on this in the city. And again, recognizing politicians are concerned about two factors: money and voters. So once we identified those key leaders, they became a core group to work with. We focus in on the core issue of structural racism, systemic racism. So we didn't focus on a narrow issue. We took an extremely broad approach with the idea that we would pick out a focus of looking at structural racism later. But we got people engaged and began talking about how we were going to get that done. So that was the initial stages of the process. We met maybe twice a month by Zoom. we would share emails. We started researching structural racism. First thing we did was definition. We looked at the various definitions. There's a ton of definitions of structural racism out there. And we then began to refine, and we continue to do so, how we would define it. And we're defining it on the basis that it is, again, when those automatic thoughts that come to your mind. For example, you walk into a room, you see a black person, you see a white person, what thoughts come into your mind? All of us have those thoughts. And so what occurs is that those are the thoughts which will cause us to make decisions which will include others, exclude others. We all have it because we've all been affected by racism, and it's embedded in each of us. Matter of fact, what happens is that this is a little story. You take an elephant, a baby elephant, and you put it on a chain. What is the baby? And you keep it on that chain, and you keep it on that chain while it grows. And what occurs then when this elephant gets much larger and it's several tons, you can put it on a rope and it won't move. It's been trained, it's been seasoned to stay where it is. And what I'm sharing with you is that blacks and browns and people who are oppressed by racism cooperate with it because they have been seasoned to not expect anything better. And the persons who are part of the oppression oftentimes are oppressing without intentionally doing it. It's just something they do automatically. So it's not a matter of identifying and calling someone a racist. It's just something that we all engage in, including the blacks and browns. So recognizing that that was what we were looking at, we began to identify, again, look at the research that's out there as to our subject matter, also to look for allies at different locations. In our situation, we found allies at the local Y because they've been talking about racism as a public health issue. We also, in part of our grouping, you take a look at your grouping, see what skills level you have. We had one person who is the head of the health for a local college, and in the health department, and so that becomes low-hanging fruit where we can look at that particular issue. We had another person who has strength in terms of housing and land use. Again, possibly low-hanging fruit. If someone has a passion, you want to your core team look to their passion, look to what they have an interest in, because they're going to work hard if they do that. And also, we didn't have a formal structure. We kept it loose. We also said, fine, meet when you can. Those who can't meet, fine. There were some people, because of scheduling, they couldn't say, look, I can go to something important. If something specifically you want me to ask to do, then fine, we'll do that. We saved those people. So when we set up, once we moved this thing along, identified the issue we wanted to work with, continued to redefine the problem, recognizing we wanted to affect public policy and who were the people in public policies, and recognizing that we had people who had skills at the table like Claude Phipps and Michael Alexander, research, and Dr. Aronson in terms of public health, and another person in terms of the housing, Kevin Burrell, and another person in education, and Claude Phipps in terms of criminal justice. It's just, so you don't want to select all those issues. You want to keep it broad for a moment, and then and set up time in which you can meet with your certain public officials. We asked for a meeting with the mayor. We asked for a meeting with the city council president to talk about could we meet with you to talk about how we can be of assistance to provide research in these areas, an area that you wish to work on. And we found out what area they wanted to emphasize. Their interest is in the area of housing and land use, but also in the area of health. So one of the things that we have, because the American Rescue money is here, And that's an asset to each community because every community can do a disparity study. So we're asking the municipality we're working with to do a disparity study. They've agreed to do it. Why is that important? Because the Croson case of 1989, I believe, Croson versus Virginia, says you have to have a disparity study to show that there's been past discrimination by a municipality before you can set up remedies to deal with it. So that can help you with momentum and getting public acceptance of what you want to do. So we got the meeting with the mayor. We had a broad section of the community. We had Muslims there. We had Baha'is there. We had Baptists there. We had Jewish rabbis there. We had experts from different fields there, and they all shared why structural racism was important to their community. Again, vote. This is important to people of importance to the public officials. And the reception was very good. We also met with the president of city council. Same thing. All the time, we're continuing to research, continue to redefine what we're going to do, and continue to work at it. And this is something we'll be working at for some time. I'm going to break off because I could go on longer, and I'm going to turn it back to Claude for a moment. Claude, please help me.
Oh, thank you, Earl. One of the things that Earl spoke about our scope again, and I think I want to reemphasize this: politics, education, finances, and banking, healthcare, land use, housing, and finally, me with criminal justice. These are areas that we somewhat try to lay out, and again, how how this racism, structural racism. I said there's basically three forms of racism that I've observed in my life. One is overt. Second is subversion. Okay, where initially people will come out and basically tell you what was on their mind. Okay, we have transitioned from that and the subvertive type of racism to the structural racism. But think about structural racism as the foundation that was laid on what preceded it. Okay, and we need to keep that in mind because indirectly we are all, and I'm going to use a legal term, we are accomplices to the crime, either because it was embedded in, I use the word DNA, in our education, our upbringing, our involvement with the various systems. It becomes structural racism almost becomes a breathing organism and basically in medical terms a breathing organism. So I'm off my soapbox. I'm going to talk a little bit about criminal justice. Okay. um, if Mike Alexander, if you're on, let me know, send me a message. A question was raised in the chat real fast by James Kavanaugh, and he basically says, are there racist algorithms and how they affect the arrest of a person? And I responded yes or no, but I'm going to walk you through this real fast. So uh, Title 18, which is criminal justice codes for Pennsylvania, and 18 USC, which is a criminal codes for United States. If you look at that, there is nowhere in any written statute that talks about race. I always said race may not exist in criminal statutes, but it basically shows up in application, whether through the police, through the prosecution, or the judges. They are the ones where racism is applied. It comes into play. One of the things is that back in 1980s, drug laws were with the introduction of crack cocaine. Drug laws were reinforced. They were reinforced a lot of times based off of input from from the legislatures, the elected officials. And guess what? For inner city, for inner city, most of those people who raised that, they were my color. They were black. Okay, they're the ones who basically call for stronger um, penalties for drugs. Okay, and their thing was that it was in the nature of trying to control the problems in their cities. Okay, this is where again where structural racism comes in. They didn't look at it as being racist. They were looking at it as a control mechanism to get rid of the drugs. But by in fact, all they did was they augmented how the law is applied against minorities. Um, I would say this, and Reverend Harris, he has background in law enforcement. Again, a person is introduced to law enforcement through the preliminary arraignment phase, where he gets arrested, charges get read to him, bail's set. Um, there's initiatives in Pennsylvania for bail reform because it unnecessarily affects the minority populations. Why? Because we don't have wealth that we can put, we don't have houses, we don't have institutional wealth that we can put up as bail to free our people. Okay. Again, we have to think about how it's going to be affected. Then, when we go to the preliminary hearing phase, okay, it's interesting. So I always says prosecutors can be very tricky. They can use the rules governing what they can present is a little bit looser at the preliminary hearing phase. All they have to do, a crime is committed, and this person probably committed. It then goes to the trial, and that's when we get into really detail, basically looking at evidence and the jury process. Both the defense gets a chance to talk, and that's where the charges have to be proven. Charges have to be proven by the prosecution. Okay, but in looking at racism and how it applies, the law doesn't. Those laws have been adjusted in the last. They started 40 years ago. They've been adjusted, but I want to leave people with this thought. It wasn't the white population that helped introduce these laws. It was our own people. I can say they didn't know any better. They were trying to solve a problem instead of thinking the problem completely out, the cause and effect relationship. What crime is prescription and punishment. We seem to basically focus more on punishment. Put a drug person in jail, and that should make him well. But when he gets into the criminal justice system, um, his chance of rehabilitation, or helping him with whatever problem is there, it's not. Our criminal justice system isn't built to basically provide that help. So what we do is we get repeat offenders. I look at our criminal justice system as I call it criminal justice system, our prison system, prison industrial complex. Once you get into it, it's designed to bring you back. You're a customer, okay, and that's learned. Okay, so when I talk about I look at systemic racism in the criminal justice system, I focus on, uh, from my standpoint, I focus on the judges to a certain point. I know the police. I've been involved with the Hartford police. Again, they try. Again, a crime has to be committed. My thing is how will the judges approach it? Will they be fair and compassionate when they said we're looking at the ideas of no bail? Okay, well, there's some crimes that I need to make sure you're going to appear in front of me again. The bail was never used as punishment. It was supposed to be used as a form to guarantee compliance and appearance. And that's what we should keep in mind: appliance and appearance. Okay. Um, and again, that's in a judge's purview. Um, More, again, I can go on about a little bit more about criminal justice, but I'm not going to do that. I've got a message from Mike Alexander. Uh, he, uh, he still is still waiting on approval. I have a message saying waiting on approval. Mike, you need to click share. The share options at the top, and it should let you in. Okay. I don't want to steal his thunder because he's got a
That's good.
paper. You
Yeah.
got it?
No, no, he's you're correct in suggesting that he does have, because he doesn't show as a request yet.
Okay. Well, he said he's signing on. He's waiting for approval. Okay. So, again, from my standpoint, and to ask Mr. Kavanaugh, there's no algorithm. It's practice. The officer from the time of the arrest. Okay. From the time he hands it off to the preliminary arraignment, or the booking um, site. Okay. There's an algorithm that affects how a person's arrested. Also, we're all taught to follow a certain set procedure. Procedure one: nature of the crime, the nature and severity of the crime. That is what we use to help set bail. Okay. Um, and basically, are you going to appear? We set the bail to that effect. Um, when you make bail, you're told within 14 or 21. If you're incarcerated 14 days, you have to have your hearing. If we let you out, you have to have it within 21 days, and that's when you come back in and you basically um, make sure to see if whether or not the prosecution has enough evidence to warrant it to go to trial. Okay,
But
so
let me ask Mr. Phipps.
yes, sir.
In those kind of situations, there's been several studies in the past few years that indicate, for example, that for same crimes, either going through the criminal justice system, people of color get a different treatment. They get harsher penalties. Then, in this, even before getting to there, with the question of
Share with
arrest
everyone what's going on, Claude.
for the same crimes,
Yes,
or for whether or not prosecutors or prosecute a crime when it's the same offense. And when you break it down between people of color and white individuals in the United States, the outcome is different.
and that's where we're saying this is where the racism element is introduced. It's not in the statute; it's in the application of that statute. Okay, where and that comes either from the district attorney's level through the judge's level. Okay, the same crime depends on location. You know, if it's a person gets caught with a joint, and I use this example in Villanova, he gets a slap on his wrist. Say a black kid gets caught with a joint in his pocket in Villanova, he gets that becomes a misdemeanor. Okay. Again, it's the application. It's in the judge's purview to basically apply that. So I'm going back to what you said, Mr. Harris. I'm turning back. I'm waiting for Mike. Do you want to handle his presentation, or you want me to try to go about it?
If can you share the screen?
N- Mr. Rodriguez, do I have screen sharing capabilities?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Okay, so you're going to have to. Or does Mr. Harris have screen sharing capabilities? You
Yes, it
should.
does. Yes, it does.
Or on the right hand side, there's three dots. Click on it. Oh, that's just mute full screen. So how would he go about sharing it? Would he have to go to the controls?
No, below, you see below, they see the CC, the
Yes.
camera, and then one that has a screen
Hmm.
share. That's a
Let's
screen.
Okay, the one
let's
that has the bolt through it.
It's between the microphone and the settings
Yes, it's a
wheel.
square with a red line. That's the share options. You got it?
yeah, I don't see it, Claude.
Okay, give me a
Yes, the
second, and
host.
it's there. It's the fourth button over before you get the little setup. Tell you what, give me a second, and I will bring up
If you
my
can get
email.
control of it, Claude.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to pull the
Sure.
email up, and I'll share
While
my
you're working
screen.
on it, may I just continue to talk?
Yes, sir. Go.
Okay, very good. What I want to share with you again, the timing is good for organizing, community organizing at the local level, and that's grassroots level. The timing is good because there's American Rescue Funds out there where the local townships and the counties can are more open to doing things they didn't do before. And I'm going to encourage each of you is to ask for a disparity study for your municipality, ask for a disparity study for your school district, because that keeps the door open for people to participate in it forever. Because the law is very clear that once you do a disparity study and you'll determine as to whether or not people are receiving contracts. It'll determine who's getting the contracts and who's not. And if there's established a pattern where people on the basis of ethnicity are not getting it and they have the ability to do the work, then you can secure a remedy for it. So getting a disparity study, asking for it meets the test of the Croson case versus Richmond, Virginia. Read it and you'll understand this. Secondly, so there's money there on the table for the disparity study. That keeps the door open forever as opposed to temporarily. Secondly, it also having a task force where you're organizing your community to deal with racism, period. You can, at that point, make a determination. Claude, interrupt me at any time. Uh,
No problem at all.
You can make a you can organize people who have a passion for this. And the key is to find passion. What we're working on is developing a think tank which will combine academic researchers and college students with people in the community and getting a mentor for our think tank. And we're working on that process again. We're work in process, but at the same time, we've met with the mayor's office and got good receptivity. We've met with the head of city council and got good receptivity, and we're continuing to organize around the issues. We've decided that the person who has a passion for health will have a subcommittee and he'll work on the area of health. Another person who has a passion for housing will work on that particular area. We've also discussing how we're going to function, whether we're going to be loosely organized or whether or not we're going to have a formal structure. That's still not decided. Uh, if we have a formal structure, it'll be a nonprofit entity, and we may file an easy plan for a 501c3, and go on from there, and to see if we can also get um, at some point in time resources in order to secure staffing, which will allow us to continue. This is a lifetime type of project. It's not something which is going to end in my lifetime. It didn't. This issue didn't start with me. It won't end with me. It'll be with my children, and yours. But it's a great one because it is, you can go into whatever area you want: criminal justice, education, land use, um, car insurance, just in terms of, and who gets in the financing of mortgages, who gets mortgages and who doesn't. Anything you can think of, structural racism is embedded into the particular structure, into whatever the issue is. So it's a great issue, and you can have a lot of fun with it. Also, we decided to let people come and go. No one's being required to be at every meeting. No one's required to do any more work than they feel comfortable with at that moment, because it's a long-term project, and we're working with volunteers at this point. And it's a good way to drive away your volunteers if you ever work them. Claude?
Okay. Yes, I'm bringing the presentation up now. I'm going to share the screen.
Okay.
Uh, Thank you,
And
guys, and thank you for taking the time. Which way? Share screen. Which window? Bingo. Share. Does everybody see that?
It's getting there. We
I
see
don't
it
see
there.
the share. Oh,
Uh,
here's coming.
We're gonna share right here. Okay.
Yeah.
So you see it?
yep. Yeah, we see it.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. So
this was prepared by
Mike,
Mike.
can you hear us? Mike? Well, Mr. Harris, you're going to be the one doing the driving, or you want me to do the
We're
driving?
going to go through what he prepared, and we're going to do a quick overview. Why
Mhm.
don't you keep scrolling,
Okay.
Claude?
No problem.
We're
So
going
the
to focus
overview
on the
again.
change strategy: personal, interpersonal, institutional, and cultural. Those are 4 areas.
Yep.
And there's a definition that we have for structural racism: automatic thoughts and feelings that lead to structural oppression that creates and maintains racial disparities faced by people of color. That's our definition. And there's a ton of definitions out there.
Okay.
So, again, automatic thoughts and feelings that lead to structural oppression. It happens without people thinking. They do it without thinking. They creates and maintains racial disparities faced by people of color. And what Claude has pointed out to you, that people of color participate in their own oppression, because they also they have embedded within their thinking racism. It's like, again, that elephant, that baby elephant, which has been held in bondage so long that they've been seasoned to keep themselves limited and down. The focus of the change strategies, again, on a personal and interpersonal. What can you do personally to eliminate structural reason? You start with yourself. Being honest with yourself is so critical. I have to be honest with my thoughts, that I have had racist thoughts. I have to be honest with me. Start with yourself. Identify your current thoughts and feeling judgments of people of color and people who are not of color. Every person, don't see this as a problem that white people have. See this as a problem that all of us have. All, like in ALL. All right. And recognize that we all have racial hierarchies that we've built in our mind. And the goal in most of us in America is to assimilate to whiteness. Many of us. And you see that in the black community with the hierarchy of light skin, dark skin, good hair, bad hair, etc. All right. I'm just saying, being honest with yourself. And I grew up in a time frame in the 50s where people were categorized as white, black, Jewish, etc. And Jews were not considered white, they were Jews. Now they're white. They've assimilated to whiteness, and they have working through that whole piece of assimilation, because that's been the goal in America, to become as white as everyone, to become assimilated and to be to whiteness.
Mr. Phipps, could
And
you
so
enlarge the
look at your own thinking, look at your own shortcomings, and we can work from there. Is Mike available, Claude?
Mike, you there?
no?
Okay,
Somebody
let's
asked.
go on to the next one.
Can I?
Focus of change,
Yeah.
Somebody asked if you can
personal
make
and
the
interpersonal. So again,
screen large.
self-examination. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with you, and it's okay. It's
There you go.
okay to have had racist thoughts, and to and because most of us have, if we're honest with ourselves, will recognize that that has occurred. Go to number B, please.
No problem. B is here.
B.
This is A and B both collapsed.
Okay, did they both collapse?
Right. So I
Okay.
think
Okay,
here,
then
I
go
think
to.
this is B. Or yeah, I can go to C if you choose to. Let's go to
Okay,
C.
well, here's, notice what he has. Go back to the point where it said become intentional.
That's
There's a
yes,
good
that's
become
the B.
intentional. Right there, stop there. Become intentional about being anti-racist. Develop the communication and advocacy skills that are required to improve your relationship with people of color, and with people of color to improve the relationships with people who are Caucasian. About 16 years ago, I started the process of reaching out to particularly the Jewish community here. And the strategy is very simple: make a friend before you need a friend. And reaching out to Caucasian community also, who are fellow persons who are clergy. Why? Again, make a friend before you need a friend. And we're continuing to do that, recognizing that all of us, including myself, have had some racist thoughts about whites or blacks or browns or whatever, light skin, dark skin, whatever. And again, you make that intention to live in that manner, and you'll begin to scrutinize yourself. Let's go to number C, please.
No problem. Ms. Rodriguez, is that large enough for people to see?
Institutional. How can we change the structural barriers people of color face? Collaborate with organizations, business, and government to commit to diversity and inclusion policy, practices, and outcomes. Again, if each of you would go back to your local community where you're integrated, where you're known, and where you have standing and status, and ask them to do a disparity study, DISPARITY, a disparity study to meet the constitutional challenge of that you cannot address issues of racism in terms of contracts and opportunities unless you can show a history of it. And these things can be quite expensive. So therefore, it's important to get the American Rescue monies, to use it, because otherwise the municipalities can rightfully say, we don't have the money, but they have it at this time. The city of Harrisburg is paying $250,000 for their study. They've got the county to put up $83,000. They're putting up $83,000, and another institution is putting up $83,000. We've also met with different municipalities in Dauphin County, and we've asked them to send letters of support to the 3 county commissioners, asking them to do a disparity study at the county level. So we're organizing it to for the purpose and giving support for the securing of a disparity study, which will help to develop more like foundation to allow us to legally create more inclusion policies, practices, and outcomes. Would you go on to number D, please? Culturally, how do we create environments that are welcoming, inclusive, and that celebrate diversity? Um, Again, building interpersonal relationships between people of different races. When I was pastoring, what I did was to work with getting our youth and getting our adults to interact with on as regular basis as possible the other churches and the synagogues who were in our community, their children, and you would have food, different foods, dancings, and other things which were common to that particular grouping. And it was just a lot of fun, making it fun so that it becomes part of the what we do as a community. Um, I believe that those are the four areas. And what happens is that if anyone would like the detail of this, please feel free to email, and Michael Alexander will make sure that he sends it to you so you can look at how we're approaching eliminating structural racism. Conclusion: racism is a much more clandestine, much more hidden kind of phenomenon, but at the same time, it's perhaps far more terrible than it's ever been. Angela Davis. Racism morphs and adapts. It's like whack-a-mole. You get rid of one manifestation of racism, and another form, usually more stealthy, develops. Like I said, it's like an algorithm in our brain. It happens automatically. Can you scroll down a little bit more?
Yes. It's almost what you said, Earl, again, with the drug, my analogy of the drug laws. Okay. That's a perfect example. It morphed into something else. That wasn't what the intent was,
Yes,
but it's there.
and share how the approach is with opiates in comparison,
Yes.
Claude.
Yes. Well, again, think about it this way. Um, when it's crack cocaine, drugs in the inner city, we have a we have a drug problem, and we need to build more prisons and more and basically enforce the law. Now, if that's the inner city in West Virginia, I've got an opiate problem. We need to get some more healthcare people involved. We need to get the community more involved. Imprisonment is not one. You don't hear that as one of the options. Why is that? Okay, is it communal? No, it's the same problem as Title One drug. Okay, whether it's crack cocaine or it's basic or opioids or cocaine itself, we have a different approach because again, it's where it's the people who are the victims. Okay, the victims are the inner city. We're minorities. Okay, it's a control mechanism. But when it's not inside that area, when it's in the suburbs or in other places, it's always thought to be a health problem. And they approach it as though it's a health problem. And there's where I look at the laws and saying maybe the laws aren't written that way. It's how we're applying it. Okay. Back to you. Still there? Did I lose everybody?
No, no, we're still here. The Reverend, I think, seems to be frozen. Um,
Okay. Let me
it, and then
Let me
while we
stop
wait for
sharing.
that,
Go back.
I think that there was another question on
Yes,
the
I'm trying to stop sharing now to get back. Let's see.
yeah.
Uh Collapse that. I'm back again. Oh yes, we lost everybody. So yes, it's good. Seriously, can we get a copy of this excellent outline, Mr. Kavanaugh? Yes. If you put your email address in here, I will make sure it gets out to you. Claude, the algorithm used in the Ohio risk assessment used by Dauphin County probation to determine the level of supervision. Yes, that you're right. The level of supervision comes about based off of the severity of the crime and whether this person will be a repeat offender. That's all taken in consideration. Okay.
I think, Mr. Phipps, because I just saw a news report here in Philadelphia
Hmm.
specifically about that a person in probation went to his appointment, and
Hmm.
then he noticed that his probation officer was not interested, were not doing anything proactive. And then he determined that he fell within the algorithm, saying that this person, don't bother with him. He's going to be a repeat offender, even if he was not at the point. And apparently, there is some legal actions going on around that. I think that's what basically what the question was referring to.
Yes, and the issue there goes back to what I was stating from the beginning. Um, and again, some people consider me a proponent. Guys, I'm not a support of defund the police or anything else, because if you defund the police, then the criminals will basically take over and rule the cities. But when I look at the application of the law, and this is what I was taught, um, that is where the coloring of the law comes into play. What's written in that book? It's a book. Book has a color in it. It doesn't talk about race in any form or fashion. It actually, we are giving procedures that we should be following. What what happens is that there's no review of there's no review of whether or not those procedures are being followed. Again, the review is when a defendant is sentenced and his attorney has an objection, a judicial objection, either on procedural or it's mostly times it's on procedural objection to what took place in his trial. Go back to the transcript and everything else. It's there where you examine the um, you examine racism at that point. I'm for one. I believe in that. Any judge sit on the bench. I want to, periodically. I want to see your last 100 rulings in a certain category, on a certain category of crime. I want to see how consistent you were. And then I'm going to compare you against. Again, we carry all this stuff in AOPC in our internal systems. There's easy way of comparing, and you can start getting a picture of the hanging judge or the lenient judge. Sometimes it said that the judges in Philadelphia are very, very lenient. Well, give me the statistics to prove that. Okay, we have the access to the information. Okay, our judges should follow this what's been taught to them in judge school. You got to go to judge school in order to sit on the bench. You need to be taught again. Even when the judge is an attorney, he still has to go to we call baby judge school. You get taught. You need to apply those principles. If you do that, your chances of having your decisions reviewed or overturned are going to be very, very less, because you basically take the emotion. It addresses your biases, and we all have biases. I have biases. Again, I don't like drug dealers. So the drug case coming in front of me, am I going to hit that drug person a lot harder than I would a person who assaulted somebody? I'm going to say no, because I've got a conscious block. I'm going to consciously think about it, and I'm going to follow what the rules are. Okay, if I don't like the rules, appeal to the legislature and get them changed. Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes,
Okay. Yeah. Somebody told me, said I'm a marshmallow. I'm not a marshmallow. You apply the law as it's stated, but again, there are some laws that were created that um, race wasn't stated in the law, but the application of the law had racial overtones. Okay, and when I did and doing the research, I'm a little bit upset that those racial overtones were caused by us trying to correct another problem. Okay, again, we should be fair across the board.
thank you.
Uh,
Are there
Another
any other
question,
questions? Any other questions from members of the audience?
Mr. Kavanaugh? I will make sure I have your email. I'm going to copy it. I'm writing it down right now, and I will make sure that you get a copy of this
Very well.
presentation.
Well, this has really been a very enlightening conversation. My apologies to Mr. Alexander; he was not able to get in. Uh, Welcome, Ms. Green.
Ms. Green.
Um, so I and I think this is that should be an ongoing conversation. I know Keystone Progress is committed to making this conversation uh, more frequent throughout
Yes.
the rest of the year, so we can begin to really make a change. Um,
Well, I
I
thank you for the invite.
Well, thank you, and then thank you to Mr. Alexander, Mr. Mike Sands, who could not make it today, and the other ones, Reverend Harris, for your participation. This session was recorded, so it's going to be available on the Keystone Progress website for people to view later on. It's also going to be available on the YouTube channel, and then everyone who registered for the conference will get notification when that's available. It should be coming up in the next few days. So you can recommend that people view this, and then you can forward it to them. Uh, there are more events coming up for the rest of the day and then all day tomorrow. Uh, just of note, there is a conversation with the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus at 6 p.m. today. And then right after that, there is a candidates forum for the U.S. Senate. And that seems to be a really interesting event coming up later at 7 p.m. today. And then tomorrow we begin promptly for breakfast at 8:15 with Chef Tony to discuss the impact of the pandemic on uh, uh, food service workers, and how that had transpired during the pandemic and after. And then for the rest of the day, we have a magnificent keynote address by Congressman Jimmy Raskin of Maryland.
Okay.
And he's been on the news lately because he serves on the House committee investigating the January 6th attacks on our democracy.
Okay.
So again, Mr. Phipps, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for carrying
Thank
the
you.
day.
Thank you
Eh,
very much. I was only supposed to be a 10-minute speaker. Okay.
You
But as you
did,
can see,
you did excellent. You were great. And then
you sound somewhat passionate about the criminal justice system. And
thank you. And it shows. And it shows. Yeah.
take care, sir.
Everyone. So thank you very much. And then stay and enjoy the rest of the summit.